What happens when a comedian known for razor sharp wit is pushed just a little too far on live television? What happens when laughter, usually his greatest weapon, suddenly becomes the very thing used against him? And what happens when that comedian decides he's not laughing anymore? Before we dive in, make sure you subscribe to Talk Flair, hit like, and drop a comment, because this story is about to take a turn no one saw coming. The studio lights of The View gleamed like polished glass as the audience buzzed with anticipation. There was a particular electricity in the air that morning, an unspoken understanding that today's episode had the potential to erupt into something unforgettable. Cameras glided across the polished floor. Producers whispered through headsets. And at the center of it all sat Joy Behar, poised behind the table with the familiar mix of confidence, sarcasm, and boldness that viewers expected from her. Then the doors opened. Chris Rock walked onto the stage. The applause was immediate, loud, excited, and tinged with curiosity. He offered that trademark half grin, the one that suggested he already had a joke in his pocket and maybe even a second one tucked behind it. But beneath the grin, beneath the effortless charisma, there was a tightness in his shoulders that only someone paying close attention could notice. He took his seat. He adjusted the mic. And for a moment, everything felt like any other celebrity interview. But this interview was not like the others. Joy leaned forward with a smile that walked the thin line between playful and provocation. "Chris," she began, "you've been in the headlines again." "Shocking, I know." Laughter rippled through the room. "But let me ask you, do you think you're addicted to drama? Or does drama just follow you around like a lost puppy?" Chris gave a small laugh. "Not the full one. Not the real one. Just a polite acknowledgement of the joke." "Well," he said, "you know how it is. Life gets messy. And sometimes people make it messy, eh?" Joy smirked. "Oh, we know. Trust me, we've all been watching." The audience gave a soft, "oh," the kind reserved for moments when they sensed a storm forming just beyond the horizon. Chris Rock sat back in his chair, folding his hands in front of him. His eyes flicked briefly toward the crowd, faces lit by studio lights, eyes wide, phones ready. He knew the dance. He'd done it 1,000 times. But something about today was different. Everything felt too sharp, too pointed. Sunny Hostin tried to steer the conversation. "Chris, you've spoken a lot recently about growth, forgiveness, and your own journey. I think viewers appreciate seeing that vulnerable side." But Joy cut in. "Vulnerable? Oh, come on, Sunny. This is Chris Rock. The man dodges vulnerability like it's a punchline." Laughter again. Bigger this time. Chris's smile faltered. There was a sudden stillness in the room. Just a flicker, but enough for the cameras to catch it. Joy rested her elbows on the desk. "Tell me, Chris," she said, her tone dipping from humorous to prying. "Do you ever regret using humor to deal with your problems? Or should I say, other people's problems?" The audience murmured. Chris looked at her, really looked at her, as if trying to decipher whether she was joking or intentionally poking the bear. Joy added, "I mean, you've made a career out of roasting people. Don't you think sometimes it's not funny?" The words hit the air like a brick. And that's when something shifted in Chris Rock. His shoulders straightened. His jaw tightened ever so slightly. And for the first time since walking onto the stage, the smile disappeared. Not gradually, not politely, but like a curtain dropping in the middle of a performance. He leaned forward. "Joy," he said quietly, "there's a difference between making jokes and being the joke." The audience snapped to attention. Joy blinked. "Well, that's what comedy is, isn't it? Everybody gets roasted. Nobody's off limits." "Sure," Chris replied. "But there's roasting, and then there's disrespect. And lately, I'm seeing a whole lot of people confuse the two." Joy tilted her head. "Oh, please. Are we really doing this?" Chris didn't look away. "You brought it up." The tension was tightening, not like a slow build, but like a rope being pulled from both ends with increasing force. You could feel the entire studio holding its breath, even the crew members along the back wall. Joy tried to push back with humor, her weapon of choice. "Well, maybe if you stopped making jokes about people's lives, they'd stop making jokes about yours." A few audience members gasped. Chris's expression darkened, not in anger, but in disappointment, which somehow felt heavier. "You think this is funny?" he asked softly. Joy shrugged. "Comedy is supposed to be funny. You're the comedian. Don't tell me you can't take a joke now." That was it. Chris sat up straight, palms flat on the table. His voice didn't rise. He didn't shout. But the steadiness in his tone made every word hit like a drumbeat. "Joy, that's not funny." The audience was dead silent. Even the air seemed to pause. Chris continued, I've been doing this for decades. I've taken every joke, every shot, every headline. But there's a line. And you crossed it the moment you tried to tell me who I'm allowed to be. Joy's smile flickered, fading just a little. It was the first sign that she hadn't expected him to push back. Not like this, not so directly, not with the kind of honesty that stripped away the usual television armor. Sunny shifted in her chair, her eyes darting between the two, clearly sensing the confrontations spiraling into dangerous territory. Sarah nervously smoothed her papers. The producers behind the scenes gestured wildly, unsure whether to intervene or let the moment run. Chris kept going, his voice low, controlled, and devastatingly clear. You don't get to decide what's funny about my life. You don't get to laugh at pain you've never lived. And you don't get to hide behind jokes when the truth makes you uncomfortable. The audience reacted, not loudly, but with a collective inhale, the kind that says this is bigger than jokes now. Joy opened her mouth as if to respond, but nothing came out, at least not immediately. She wasn't used to being challenged like this, especially not by someone who knew the power of words just as well as she did. Chris sat back, the tension still radiating off him like heat from a flame. Everyone in the studio felt it. Everyone watching at home would feel it too. And no one, absolutely no one, knew what was coming next. The silence after Chris Rock's words wasn't empty. It was loaded, vibrating with shock and tension, as if the entire room had stepped onto a fault line seconds before an earthquake. Even the cameras seemed to hesitate, their red lights steady but somehow watchful, like sentinels bracing for impact. Joy Behar blinked once. Twice. Her trademark smirk had vanished, replaced by something far less familiar, uncertainty. But she wasn't one to surrender a moment of power, not on her stage, not in front of her audience. She straightened in her chair, lifted her chin, and forced out a laugh that didn't quite reach her eyes. Come on, Chris, she said. Don't take yourself so seriously. But her voice had an edge now, thin and sharp. Chris didn't flinch. I take people seriously, he replied, calm but unwavering. That's why I expect the same in return. A murmur rippled across the audience, low, uneasy, like the sound of wind moving through a room that had suddenly grown colder. The hosts exchanged anxious glances. Sunny leaned forward as if preparing to mediate, but before she could speak, Joy lifted a hand to stop her. No, Joy said, eyes locked on Chris. He wants to talk. Let's talk. Chris tilted his head, studying her with a quiet intensity. He wasn't angry, not in the explosive sense. His demeanor held something deeper, something more controlled. It was the look of someone who had decided, after years of letting people write the script for him, to finally grab the pen. Joy went in again, this time more directly. Chris, listen. People joke about you because you joke about everyone. It's fair game, isn't it? You can't dish it out and then cry foul. The audience gasped softly. The tension tightened like a rope drawn through clenched fists. Chris responded slowly. I don't cry foul. I call things what they are. And what you said, what you've been saying, it's not about comedy. It's about dismissal. You're dismissing my experiences like they're punchlines, and they're not. Joy crossed her arms. Oh, please. Everything's a joke to you until it's about you. Chris leaned closer, lowering his voice, making the audience lean in with him. No, Joy. Everything's a joke to you until you get called out for it. A sharp wave of oaths swept through the studio. Joy stiffened. Her eyes flashed with irritation. No longer the playful spark she brought to debates, but something harder, defensive, almost wounded. Sunny cleared her throat gently. Let's just take a breath, okay? We're all here to have a conversation. But Joy wasn't done. You know what I think, Chris? She cut in, her voice rising just enough to slice through Sunny's attempt to mediate. I think you've lost your sense of humor. Or maybe you're just afraid of certain jokes now. Chris's face didn't change, but something in the air did. A shift. A tightening. A moment where everyone watching sensed they were witnessing a boundary being crossed in real time. He spoke with icy clarity. I'm not afraid of jokes. I'm afraid of people who hide insults inside them. Joy blinked, caught off guard. Chris continued. Humor isn't supposed to be a weapon against the wounded. It's supposed to be a bridge. A way to understand each other. But you don't use it that way, Joy. You punch down. And when someone finally stands up to you, you pretend it's all just a misunderstanding. The audience was frozen, eyes wide, breaths shallow. Joy's voice trembled. Not with fear, but with frustration. Oh, give me a break, Chris. You've spent your entire career making fun of people's sensitivities. Now suddenly you're the sensitive one? Really? There it was, the line that cut through everything, the spark that ignited the powder beneath the table. Chris didn't react with anger. Instead, he inhaled, exhaled, and spoke in a tone so steady, so grounded, it commanded every ear in the room. You think sensitivity is a weakness, he said. But it's not. It's human. And maybe if you understood that, your jokes would have a little more heart. Joy's eyes narrowed. My jokes have plenty of heart. No, Chris replied gently but firmly. They have bite. And sometimes bite is just bitterness wearing a smile. A sharp gasp shot through the audience. Joy's face flushed. So now I'm bitter? That's what you're saying. Chris hesitated, just 1 second, and that hesitation said everything. He wasn't trying to humiliate her. He wasn't trying to win. He was trying to be honest. And honesty, in moments like this, felt more dangerous than any punchline. I'm saying, Chris answered softly, that you've gotten comfortable hurting people because you assume the laugh will protect you. Joy's breath caught. She didn't speak. She couldn't. Sunny jumped in again, voice low and urgent. Okay, let's slow this down. We're crossing into personal territory. But Chris wasn't finished. And when someone tells you they've had enough, he continued, you shrug it off and make another joke. Because you're scared that if the jokes stop, the truth will start. The room fell into absolute stillness. Joy finally managed to speak, her voice thin. And what truth is that, Chris? Chris leaned in, looking her directly in the eyes. That sometimes you hurt people and don't want to admit it. Joy's breath hitched. The audience watched her face shift, defensiveness giving way to something raw, something she wasn't prepared to feel on live television. She looked down at her hands, then up again, fighting to keep her composure. For the first time, she didn't have a comeback. Sarah attempted to interject, her voice cracking slightly. Maybe we can take a moment to reset. But suddenly, a laugh erupted from the audience. Not a big one. Just one person. One uncomfortable, nervous laugh. It slashed through the quiet like a blade. Chris's head turned sharply toward the crowd. The single laugh echoed strangely, desperately, as if someone thought they could break the tension with humor. But the moment it left their mouth, they regretted it. Chris looked back at Joy. See, he said softly. That's what happens when people don't know whether to laugh or listen. Joy swallowed hard. She looked smaller somehow, not physically, but emotionally. The fight drained from her shoulders, replaced by confusion, maybe even a pang of guilt. She glanced around the table, searching for support, but the other hosts were frozen in shock. The cameras zoomed in, capturing every flicker of emotion across her face. The audience waited. The world waited. Then Joy whispered, almost too quietly for the microphones to catch. Maybe I went too far. Chris didn't speak. He didn't move. He simply held her gaze, letting the weight of the moment hang between them. But this confrontation was not over. Not even close. Because if part 1 was the spark, part 2 was the flame. Then part 3? Part 3 was about to be the explosion. The moment Joy Behar whispered, maybe I went too far, the energy in the studio shifted, but not in the direction anyone expected. It didn't dissolve the tension. It didn't calm the storm. Instead, it created something far more volatile. Silence wrapped around uncertainty, guilt, and pride all tangled together. Chris Rock's expression softened, just slightly, but the strain in his jaw remained. He wasn't attacking. He wasn't performing. He was simply telling a truth he'd swallowed for years. A truth that wasn't meant to be explosive, yet somehow lit the fuse on national television. Before he could respond, Whoopi Goldberg, silent until now, finally spoke. All right, she said gently, her voice a low anchor trying to pull the show back to steady waters. Let's breathe. We're on live television, folks. We can talk. We can debate. But Joy lifted her hand, stopping even Whoopi. Her voice trembled, not with fear, but with something unfamiliar, vulnerability. No, Joy said. Let him talk. Chris blinked, surprised. He didn't expect that. The audience didn't expect that. Joy Behar, one of the most opinionated women on daytime TV, was letting him talk. No interruptions. No defenses. No jokes. He leaned forward, elbows on the table, hands clasped as if weighing his words carefully. Joy, he began, I don't want to fight you. I'm not here to embarrass you. I'm not here to snap back on national television. I'm here because I've spent my whole life being the guy people assume can take anything. Joy lowered her gaze. Chris continued, voice softening but steady. You think comedy is armor, but sometimes it's camouflage. The audience listened, riveted. You joke about things, he said, because you don't want anyone to see what hurts underneath. I get that. I live that. But there's a difference between laughing to survive and laughing at someone else's survival. Joy inhaled sharply, lifting her eyes to meet his. Something flickered there, recognition maybe. Chris kept going. And every time you've joked about my life or my mistakes or my pain, you don't know what that moment cost me. You don't know what I was carrying. You don't know how close I was to breaking. The confession hit the room like a soft but devastating blow. Joy's voice cracked as she said, "You never said anything. You always laughed it off." Chris nodded. "Because that's what the world expects of me. Laugh it off. Shrug it off. Be the strong one. Be the funny one. Be the guy who turns pain into punchlines." His eyes hardened, the intensity returning. "But I'm not a joke, Joy. And I'm tired of pretending I am." Joy's breath faltered. She attempted to respond, but her voice failed her. Whoopi glanced between them, torn between stepping in and letting the moment unfold. Chris leaned back, exhaling slowly. "I'm not angry at you. I'm angry at the pattern. At the idea that some people think they can say whatever they want because they assume comedy protects them." Joy swallowed. "I didn't mean to hurt you." Chris didn't hesitate. Intent doesn't erase impact. The words landed with a weight that made the studio fall completely silent again. Sarah nervously shifted her papers, trying to regain some composure. Sunny watched with wide eyes, as if witnessing a tectonic shift. Even the cameraman stood frozen, lenses steady but hands trembling just slightly. Joy finally spoke after several long seconds. "You know, I've joked about a lot of people. Most of them laugh. Most don't take it personally." Chris tilted his head. "Maybe they should." Joy blinked, startled. "What? Maybe," Chris said slowly. "The problem is we've normalized hurting people publicly. We celebrate it, retweet it, turn it into viral moments. And we tell ourselves it's harmless because it's just a joke. But jokes carry weight. Jokes can wound." Joy opened her mouth to protest, but Chris raised a hand gently, not to silence her, but to make a point. "I'm a comedian," he said. "I've made mistakes. I've crossed lines. I'm not perfect. But I try, every day, to understand the people I joke about. I study them. I feel them. Because comedy without compassion isn't comedy. It's cruelty." A soft gasp rippled through the audience. This wasn't a celebrity feud anymore. It was a revelation unfolding in real time. Joy looked down, her voice small. "Maybe I forget that sometimes." Chris nodded softly. "We all do." For a brief moment, the tension loosened. A breath seemed to move across the stage. But before the mood could even begin to settle, someone in the audience shouted, "Say you're sorry, Joy." The entire room snapped to attention. Joy's head jerked toward the crowd, eyes wide with shock. A mix of embarrassment and frustration crossed her face. "I don't need an audience to tell me what to say," she snapped reflexively. But the damage was done. The crowd murmured again, some agreeing, some disapproving. The noise grew louder, more chaotic. Whoopi stood up slightly from her chair. Hey, let's not turn this into a circus." But the studio had already tipped into dangerous territory. Sarah tried to calm the crowd. "Everyone, please, let's stay respectful." But another voice rose from the seats. "Chris deserves better." Joy looked shaken now, truly shaken. And then Chris did something unexpected. He turned to the audience. "Stop," he said firmly. "This isn't about humiliating Joy. This isn't about turning her into the villain." He looked back at Joy, his expression earnest. "I didn't say what I said to make you apologize. I said it so you'd understand." Joy's eyes filled with emotion, not tears, but something rawer. Something she usually kept tucked far behind her humor. "I do understand," she whispered. "More than you think." But the audience wasn't done. A tension had formed inside them too. One fueled by the thrill of confrontation and the desire to see a resolution, to see someone humbled, to see someone win. That hungry silence twisted into noise again, buzzing, swelling. And then suddenly Joy stood up. The hosts froze. Chris looked shocked. The audience went silent instantly. Joy placed both hands on the table and spoke with a trembling voice that carried across the entire studio. "I'm not perfect. I make mistakes. I push too far. I know that. But I'm not heartless. And I'm not hiding behind jokes. Sometimes I joke because I'm scared. Scared of being wrong. Scared of looking weak. Scared of being human." The confession stunned everyone. Even Chris's expression softened again, deeper this time. Joy breathed out shakily. I didn't mean to hurt you. But I did. And I'm sorry. The studio exploded, not in noise but in emotion. Gasps, sighs, whispers, all flooding together like a wave. Chris closed his eyes briefly, as if processing the weight of the moment. But before he could respond, before the hosts could shift, before the audience could catch their breath, a producer's voice echoed loudly across the studio from offstage. Cut to commercial. Cut to commercial. The screen lights strobed. The hosts froze mid-motion. And just like that, everything cut to black. When the screen went black for commercial, the silence behind the scenes was louder than anything that had happened on camera. The studio lights dimmed, the audience murmured in confusion, and the hosts sat frozen, caught between the weight of what had just unfolded and the uncertainty of what would come next. Chris Rock remained seated, hands clasped, staring forward as if replaying every moment in his mind. Joy Behar stood motionless at the table, her emotions flickering across her face, defiance, remorse, vulnerability, all fighting for space. Producers rushed onto the set, their headsets crackling, voices overlapping in frantic whispers. Is audio still hot? Do not let anyone leave. Check Joy's mic, she's shaking. Is Chris okay? The controlled chaos behind the scenes clashed against the emotional chaos sitting at the center of the stage. Sunny leaned in toward Joy. Take a breath. Sit down. It's okay. Joy finally lowered herself into her chair, but she looked smaller than she had in years, like a giant suddenly aware of her own shadow. Chris inhaled deeply, exhaling through a tight jaw. But he wasn't angry anymore. There was something else in his expression, something that looked like a wound that had finally been acknowledged after years of silence. Whoopi was the first to break the behind-the-scenes tension. She placed a hand lightly on Chris's shoulder and murmured, "You all right?" Chris nodded slowly. "Just tired, Whoopi. Tired of all of it." Whoopi didn't press further. She tapped his shoulder gently and moved to Joy, who was rubbing her palms against her legs, unable to look up. Producers came rushing toward them. "We'll be back in 30 seconds, one of them said breathlessly. "Keep it civil. Keep it calm. No more escalation." But everyone knew the escalation had already happened. There was no going back. Not for Chris. Not for Joy. Not for the show. A red light blinked, flashing across the stage. 10 seconds. 5, 3, 2, 1. And then the cameras came alive again. The view returned from commercial, but not the way it usually did. There was no upbeat music. No cheerful transition. No playful banter. Just 5 hosts sitting at a table that suddenly felt far too small for the emotions inside it. The camera zoomed in on Joy first. Her face was steady now, but her voice, when she finally spoke, betrayed the storm still swirling inside her. "Before we continue," she said softly, "I want to address what just happened." The audience shifted, holding their breath. Joy looked up, eyes shifting briefly toward Chris before returning to the viewers at home. "Live television is messy," she said. "It's unscripted, unpredictable, and human. And today I crossed a line. I said things I shouldn't have. And because it was public, the apology should be public too." Her voice wavered. "Chris, I'm sorry." The audience didn't clap. Not yet. The moment was too tender, too fragile. Chris didn't respond immediately. He took a slow breath, then leaned into his microphone. "I appreciate that," he said quietly. "And I want to say something too." Everyone leaned in. "I'm not here to make enemies. I'm not here to dredge up drama. I've been carrying things for a long time. And sometimes when you spend years laughing so the world doesn't hear you hurting, eventually something breaks through." He glanced at Joy, his expression steady. "You and we've been on opposite sides of jokes for years. But today we finally talk like people. Not performers. Not punchlines. Just people." Joy's eyes glistened. "But," Chris continued, "that doesn't make what happened easy. Or simple. Or resolved. It just makes it real." The audience absorbed every word. Then Whoopi stepped in, her voice warm and grounding. What you're seeing right now, is what conversations look like. Not the polished ones. Not the safe ones. The real ones. And sometimes real conversations hurt before they heal." A soft murmur of agreement traveled through the crowd. Sunny added, "We may disagree. We may clash. But the point is that we listen. And today we all had to listen." Sarah nodded. "And maybe we're better for it." Joy wiped her cheek subtly, trying to hide it, failing. Chris leaned back, letting the moment settle. But the world outside the studio? The world was already on fire. As the show continued, cameras captured the hosts speaking calmly, thoughtfully, cautiously. But backstage, phones were vibrating nonstop. Producers whispered urgent updates. Twitter is exploding. He's trending #1. Joy's clip has 2 million views already. People are divided. Has Chris's team responded yet? Networks are calling. Even the host's personal phones buzzed on the table, notifications lighting up relentlessly. And when the show finally wrapped, after what felt like both an hour and a lifetime, Chris Rock stood from the table with a tired sigh. Joy hesitated, then stood too. Before she could speak, Chris offered something unexpected. A small, tired smile. No jokes. No sarcasm. Just understanding. Joy exhaled shakily. "Thank you," she whispered. Chris nodded. "Take care of yourself, Joy." Then he walked off stage. The moment he left the set, producers, assistants, and camera crew rushed in, all talking at once. "Chris, can we get a statement? Just one comment for the network? Are you okay? Do you need security?" But Chris didn't answer right away. He simply stood there, letting the whirlwind of questions swirl around him like dust in a spotlight. His shoulders rose and fell in a slow breath. Finally, he said, "Guys, I'm fine. I just need a minute." And he stepped away, out of the cluster of cameras, out of the noise, out of the chaos. Meanwhile, Joy sat at the empty table alone. The audience had cleared. The lights had dimmed. The stage felt hollow. She stared at her reflection in the glossy surface of the table, seeing not a host, not a comedian, not the woman who had made millions laugh, but a person who had been forced to see herself through someone else's pain. A tear slipped down her cheek. Off stage, Chris paused, looking back just briefly. Then he walked out, and from that moment forward, the internet erupted. Clips spread like wildfire. Hashtags trended. Public opinion split like tectonic plates. Some people called Chris brave. Others said Joy was unfairly targeted. Some praised the honesty. Others accused the show of staging it. But one thing was undeniable. Everyone was talking about it. The confrontation became one of the most explosive moments in daytime TV history. Not because of the fight, but because of the honesty inside it. The truth. The pain. The exposure of two public figures stripped of scripts and expectations. It was raw. It was human. It was unforgettable. And now, to everyone watching this, what do you think? Was Joy out of line? Was Chris right to speak up? Did the confrontation go too far, or not far enough? Tell us in the comments below. We want to hear your take on this moment. And don't forget, subscribe to Talk Flair for more explosive, dramatic, cinematic breakdowns of the biggest celebrity confrontations and on-air moments you won't see anywhere else. Because this was just the beginning. More stories are coming, and you won't want to miss a single one.